Hello YouTube and welcome to my channel. I am TJ and today I want to give my ode to real fathers, real men. Yesterday was Father's Day and it can bring some mixed emotions. Some people are happy, some people are sad, and I think as it relates to me, I have had some mixed emotions yesterday that I would like to share. So let's get into it. So, yesterday was Father's Day, and like I said, overall it was a good day. I glowed my husband and, made him his favorite dish and gave him a pedicure myself, um, and bought him a beautiful um, bracelet that he probably wouldn't have bought for himself. So we spent the time just hanging out and enjoying each other's company. Okay, so like I said, yesterday was Father's Day, and I thought it would be a good idea to kind of continue in that vein to talk about some things that are important to me, and hopefully you all will get something out of it. Yesterday, while watching, my husband and I attended church virtually, and the topic or the title of the sermon was "Thank You, Dad." I hear a lot of people say baby daddy, which drives me nuts. But I will tell you, there is a difference between someone who fathers a child and someone who is a daddy. Not a baby daddy, but a daddy. And I say that because I often remember my mother growing up, and she grew up, but um, she called my grandfather daddy until the day he passed. So, and speaking of my grandfather, that is a picture. What I have displayed is a picture of what I call the Jones men, because that is how we presented ourselves back in the day. And my grandfather is the second person from the left. I think he's the tallest one, and yes, he was a good-looking gent. Um, so those are the Jones men. But yesterday during the sermon, the pastor he talked about 6 things that a father is when we talk about thank you, Dad. Um, he said a real dad or good dad is going to be present, be present in school activities, be present in communication, sit down with them and, talk about what's going on in their lives, who their friends are. They're going to be present. And I know sometimes it's difficult for fathers to be present because they have this huge responsibility of taking care of the family. And sometimes men think that by taking care of your children, financially, that's being present. Well, that is definitely provision, but there's more to it than the monetary piece. He also talked about be present and fathers stay involved. This is paramount. A lot of mothers and fathers don't stay together. Sometimes get divorced, sometimes they were never married. But what has happened, unfortunately, is that when parents get divorced, sometimes fathers divorce the children. They still they need both parents. That's why God designed it that way. I know sometimes it can be difficult dealing with a woman who feels that they may have been scorned, and sometimes we can use our children as pawns. But I urge you and encourage you to continue to stay involved in your children's lives. Continue to, every time you're scheduled to visit. I encourage you to, when you promise you're going to be there for something, be there for something. Because everything that parents do and don't do leaves an indelible impression on our children. stay present, be involved. Um, Also, he talked about children need attention. We all know our children, and some, every child is different, but in some way, all children need attention. And if we're paying attention, we know what they need. They need attention. They need um, affection and admiration. They need hugs. They need, I love you. They need to know that it's okay if they make mistakes, that they're never going to lose your love if they make mistakes, or if their grades are not up to par, if they get into trouble. If they get into trouble, you're going to hold them accountable, but that your love is unconditional. Fathers need to protect. I know it's difficult sometimes, particularly when kids get to be teenagers, kind of opening up and let them know that you were a teenager too when they try to pull the wool over your eyes and say, I was born yesterday, but I wasn't born yesterday, or I was born at night, but not last night. Sometimes we have to take the hats off and talk to them like we were when we were their age, because they don't think that we've made mistakes. They think that we woke up at the age we are now. No, it don't go down like that. So, but in that discussion, you are protecting them. And that's why certain things you want to share about the mistakes you made. You know, you want to share about the mistakes you made. You want to provide for your children. No, it's not all about money, but money is important to ensure food, shelter, and clothing. Do not be the father that says, oh, I don't want to give money because she's going to, she makes enough money, she's going to use it for whatever. Well, you know what? That may happen. But don't ever let it be said that you didn't do what you were supposed to do. Because I'm going to tell you, as one of those kids, I want to see the receipts. So, and I'm saying it figuratively, but there may be a time, I'm not, there are some women who lie about what the father is doing, trying to do. And I kept telling my brother, as a matter of fact, I said, continue to send the money. Continue to send the money, because when my nephew gets to an age and they ask, you can show them that I sent your mother money. She wouldn't let me see you, or whatever. Continue to do your part, because at some point they're going to ask, and then if us mothers are not doing what we're supposed to do, we're going to have to pay the piper for how we deprived our children from their fathers. So those are some of the things from yesterday's sermon that really resonated with me, and I wanted to share with you. But moving on, I did a post yesterday on Facebook because it was on my heart to do so. And I'm going to talk about my post with you. The post reads that I dedicate our Happy Father's Day to the one whom with my mother gave me life, to the man who from a baby called me his own, and to the patriarch of the Jones family who led by example each and every day. I love you all. So I'm going to share with you a little bit about each one of those and how they have impacted my life. This is my father, my biological father. He and my mom got pregnant, I guess, when my mother was 16 years old. And suffice it to say, neither one of them knew what they were doing because they were both kids. Um, but he was my dad and is my father. He's still living. I'm really grateful for for the opportunity to have a relationship with him. But I will say it has not always been good. I did not meet my biological father or even know that I had a separate biological father from my sister until I was 6 years old. I thought my stepfather was my father. Well, as it with all kids, you want to please your parent. And because I hadn't known him, it was, so important for me to establish this relationship. But as a kid, I felt torn between two fathers because I loved the man that I knew as my father, but I also loved this man who I looked like, and I wanted to get to know him. But as a kid, I was in the middle, feeling guilty for loving my stepfather and feeling guilty for loving my dad. It's important. And as a daughter, I can tell you that we want nothing more than the acceptance, love, and approval from our fathers. I don't care how old the daughter gets, she always needs her father. Because my dad had me young and he was out of my life, and when he came into my life, it was inconsistent. I think it had an impact on the relationships I would have with men because I was yearning. And because of the inconsistency of my father in my life growing up, it affected my self-esteem. It affected my view of myself and what I had to offer as a young woman. Because many times, girls, if we don't feel that we have the love or are good enough for our own fathers, we question who we're good enough for. And I'm not, I don't believe for a moment that my father intended to hurt me. I don't think that at all because, he was still young. But also in being young, he was selfish. And me as a kid, I paid the price for that. It wasn't until I was 30 years old that my father was during one of my many heartbreaks that my dad saw the toll that it took on me because that last one was I really loved that guy. And my dad said to me, "I'm so sorry. I wish I would have been a better father to you because had I done that, I think it would have affected the decisions that you made as far as men are concerned." And he was right. He was right. So, but I love him because without him, I would not be here. And he has and still continues to play a role in my life. This is my stepfather. I recently learned, I knew that him and my mother got married young. I knew by the time my mother was 19 and married with my dad, they had me and my sister. But what I did not know is that my dad met my mother when I was 6 weeks old on her way. She was on the bus on the way from taking me for my 6-week doctor appointment. So he met my mother when I was 6 weeks old, and they started dating, ultimately got married, then had my sister. And like I said, for the first 6 years of my life, I didn't even know that he was not my biological father because he gave me his last name. All of my school records up until college have his last name. Now, the funny thing about it is that they didn't change my name legally. So, back in the day, they didn't have all the things in place to make sure that people were who they said they were. So by the time they enrolled me in school, they just enrolled me as Terry Phillips. And that was my name all the way up through graduation from high school. But he gave me his name. And even to this day, he calls me his oldest child. So I am his oldest child. So he loved me. So in as much as my dad was young and selfish, my stepfather was young but selfless. Now, he had plenty of faults I'm not even going to perpetrate. But again, I love him for that. I love him because he called me his own. This is my pawpaw. When I think of an example of what a man is, it is Joseph Jones. It is Joseph Jones. When I think of the things that the pastor talked about in yesterday's sermon, I think of my grandfather, and that's why sometimes Father's Day is a little sad for me because I miss him so. I was the first grandchild born to his youngest child, so we had a pretty special relationship. Pretty special indeed. But I know as a child watching him operate, he had 2, sometimes 3 jobs, but he was there for his family. He provided for his family. He protected for his family. And even after working a hard day, I remember my grandfather would come home and make sure his car was washed, the lawn was manicured. I think he took pride in the fact that his yard was, nicer than anybody else's, but also he knew his children. My mom recently shared with me that when she was married to my stepdad and they were in Baltimore because my dad was in the military. Now, mind you, we're from Los Angeles, California. And so when they got married, they were in Los Angeles, California, and then moved to Baltimore, Maryland while my dad was in the military. My mother would tell me of times that out of the blue, there'd be a knock on the door on the base in Baltimore, and it's my grandfather standing there in front of her. He would send my grandmother to the grocery store, and no sooner than my grandmother left, he got on the plane going to see about his baby. Now, mommy said to me, she thought, dad, that Pawpaw was tripping, but now as a grandmother herself, he knew that his daughter, his child, although she was married with 2 children, didn't know what the heck she was doing. She was still a kid. So he went to Baltimore to check in on his baby and her babies. And then after they separated and my mama moved us back to California and my mother had her first place with the 2 of us, my grandfather just happened to be in the neighborhood every day. Happened to be in the neighborhood every day, bringing us the mason jars of coffee milk that my grandmother had made for us because why? He was seeing about his children and he knew that although she was our mother, she was his baby and she was still growing up herself. So when I think of my grandfather, when I think of what a man is, it is Joseph Jones. It is Joseph Jones. These are the 3 men that I paid homage to yesterday because they've impacted my life. They've impacted my life. But moving on, I think particularly when I think about what a father is to a daughter, I cannot stress enough the impact that you leave on their lives. I can't stress it because the first love that a girl has is that of her father. And the foundation of that can determine the direction in which she chooses to go when it comes to picking the right men for her. It took me many years to find the right man because why? I was picking men that were like my father, my biological father. And although I love him, he was, he did not really value women. He was selfish, only child. He was a hustler. I'm gonna leave that alone, but you understand what I mean. And he was, he was cool, he was flashy, he was all those things, and that's what I gravitated toward. But That's not what I needed. What I needed and really what I wanted in my heart of hearts, even though I didn't know it, was someone like my grandfather. Someone like my grandfather. And at 52 years old, I met the man that was like my grandfather. My grandfather didn't talk a lot, but when he did, he had something to say, and everybody paid attention to see what Uncle Joseph or what Daddy or what Pawpaw was saying. It was like E.F. Hutton. My husband is the same way. He don't talk a lot, but when he does, he has something to say, and he don't miss nothing. In every way that I told you that my grandfather provided, protected, supported, my husband does that for me. He does that for me. So again, parents are important, fathers are important.